usually is.
Brown drives, layup off the glass.
That's not the first time we've seen a superstar in green and white sacrifice the body.
Garnett knocked away.
Ben Vallis here with First to the Floor, along with Wayne Spoonie and Jake Eisenberg. Thank you for joining us. Hope you're doing well. A disappointing loss for the Celtics last night. They are instead back home in Boston instead of Vegas, awaiting the outcome of tonight's Knicks-Bucks game. But we're going to try and bring some levity here, and joining us to do just that, from NBC Sports Boston, new voice of the Celtics, Drew Carter. Drew, welcome, mate. How's it going?
What's up, fellas? It's great to be here. As you can see, I recently moved to Boston, so I have nothing in my background. I've been told it's better than Greenies from Barstool, though. I have not been kidnapped, so that's a plus. And yeah, I'm watching this game right now on TV, and some in-season tournament. I don't know what that's all about. I've never heard of the in-season tournament before, so I don't know what they're doing, but it looks interesting.
Exactly. What in-season tournament, right? Like, we never cared about. I know we spent the whole last podcast selling everyone on the importance of this thing. Suddenly, doesn't feel important anymore, guys. Spoonie, Jake.
I never cared.
Yeah, I'm upset.
It was all a ruse.
Yeah, I was not screaming in my living room for Joe Mazzulla to put Luke Cornett back in to make sure we won the game by 23 points, and then definitely did not flip to the Raptors-Nets game to scream at Spencer Dinwiddie to not ruin everything for me. That didn't happen. None of that happened at all.
I definitely didn't defend the Hacker Drummond with my life. No. Absolutely never happened. Did not care. Yeah.
Absolutely.
The mortgage bump is a new phenomenon, clearly, in the NBA. We saw that from Luke Cornett the last couple of days. We've seen the baby bump. We've seen all kinds of bumps, statistical and performance-related bumps. The mortgage bump is a new piece of intel to be gathered from the in-season tournament, and nothing else important is going to come from this, as far as I am concerned. Drew, you mentioned you just moved to Boston. Obviously, you're only doing road games at the moment. How does that work for you otherwise? Like, how are you spending your time when you're not calling games?
Yeah, Ben, it's a good question. I guess technically I don't really have to live here yet. Starting next year when I do the full slate following Mike, I would. But I just wanted to be here, man. Want to be in the mix. And thank you, Landon. Just want to be in Boston, be part of this community. Because one of the things I've learned, and already knew this before I started working with the team, but that has really been crystallized for me since I started working here is the fan base is insane in the best possible way, right? I mean, like
it's true.
There's a reason why, there are 1,000 Celtics podcasts, and why, it's been a pleasure to get to chat with a bunch of people like you guys about just how much we love this team. And it's also good that the team is nasty. I mean, last night notwithstanding, it's great to be part of such a good team. So I just wanted to be here, talk to people about it and learn a little bit more about Boston, and then who knows, maybe in a few years actually sound like I'm from here, like Mike does.
That's going to be great. Like, the closer your voice gets to Tommy Heinsohn and Mike Gorman, the better, right? That's. I guess that's what you can do in your off days. It's just grind Heinsohn tape, but broadcast only.
and Heinsohn, the funny thing about him is I don't even think he was from Boston originally. I think he was born at least in New Jersey. So it gives me hope that you can pick up. You can pick up and sound like you're from Boston, even if you weren't actually born there originally.
Exactly.
All right. Yeah, we were joking about the in-season tournament. We were pretty pumped. We thought it was awesome. But what was the atmosphere like in Indy? Because it looked pretty raucous. That crowd was loud on TV. And how did it compare to – I know nothing compares to a Monday night in Charlotte. Like, obviously, that's the best atmosphere of basketball. But – how did it compare to games you've called on the road? And what was uglier, the court or Halliburton's jump shot?
There's a lot there, Spoonie. So first of all, on the atmosphere, to give you guys an idea of, what my brain is doing during a broadcast. So there was a moment where we showed some crowd shots. You guys remember in The Last Dance, the crazy lady who was heckling the Bulls? I think it was in Utah. You guys remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah, 100%.
So for a moment there, I was trying to remember, like, was that woman from Indiana in The Last Dance? Because I know, like, the Bulls matched up with the Pacers, and let's be honest, she kind of looked like she could be from Indiana or Utah. And I thought about making a reference to The Last Dance, but then I remember that I think she was from Utah. I was about 99% sure. But that tells you all you need to know about how juiced up people were in there. Like, there was a lot of energy it did, like, I haven't called an NBA playoff game, but I've been to them, and it sort of felt like that in the arena. And I also think that, not to say this didn't mean a lot to the Celtics, but I think for a team like the Pacers, and we saw it last night with the Pelicans as well, they probably know this is their best chance to win a tournament this season. Whereas with the Celtics, like, and again, not to say they weren't trying last night, but I think it's human nature to know, hey, we've got the real tournament coming up in the spring. Whereas with the Pacers, I think we all agree they're a playoff team, but probably not a legit contender, at least not when you get to seven-game series. And so for them, this did feel big. We said it a couple times last night. It sort of felt like it was their Super Bowl. And Tyrese Halliburton is a guy who is competitive as hell. And he didn't even play in their last game Saturday at Miami, and they still scored 144. But he was out with a slash injury. He had an illness/bone bruise in his knee. So he, like, legit missed that game, came back two nights later, and was incredible. He had 2 assists at halftime. I think ended up with 13. Like, he basically had a triple-double in the third quarter alone. So all that to say, like, the atmosphere was amazing. It's easy to forget because it was a 10-point final. It was a tie game with under 2 minutes left. It was just really, really fun. And the thing is, Scal and I weren't going to Vegas anyway, but the players were. And I think they were pretty upset that they didn't get the chance to go. Like, for some of the guys, the $500,000 would mean a lot. For Tatum and Brown and guys making that much money, it wouldn't. But you could see how disappointed JT and JB were that they weren't going to Vegas. Like Brown said, I guess we'll have to settle for Encore in Boston. And I might be joining them there this week because I don't have a road game anymore. But yeah, like, you could tell that both teams really wanted to win.
Okay, now I understand Encore in Boston. I was like, does that just mean we're going to play again in Boston? That's a club? See, this is what happens when you... Casino. Oh, mate, now you're talking my language. All right, but yeah, so that's the problem with living on the other side of the world, is I'm not intimately familiar with the club scene in Boston. But I think there's a few reasons why it meant a lot to Indy. You're absolutely right. This is like their chance to win something. And Halliburton's talked already this season about, like, I just want to win now. I lost a lot in Sacramento. People like talk about that trade and how maybe the Kings should have done it. It was a dumpster fire. I remember when they made that trade, there was like a sign behind the broadcast that just said, "Welcome to hell, Domas Sabonis." So it's like he was losing a lot there. They lost a lot with Indy, and so they just want to win something. And Indy hasn't had like real playoff basketball in a while now. The last time they're in the playoffs, they played actually the Celtics in round 1. Celtics swept them. 2, revenge game. Aaron Nesmith. Oh. That's one part of the revenge game. Secondly, the Celtics beat them by 50 recently. Yeah. And then also Halliburton just, for some reason, absolutely kills the Celtics. Since he's like entered the league, especially since getting to the Pacers, he just murders us. And so you put all that together, especially with like the epilepsy-inducing court colors, it was just a recipe for a cauldron.
I don't know if I would say epilepsy-inducing. I would say it more felt like it was a Saturday morning and I was watching cartoons.
Okay.
Maybe had
SpongeBob
some
vibes.
candy. Yeah, but it was... The court actually looked pretty cool in person. I will say that. I don't know if I could say the same thing for Chicago, and we won't get the chance to see that,
Sure.
But the Bulls, to me, had the worst court. Mm-hmm. It basically made my eyes bleed when I was watching that. And I don't know if it looked better in person, but I think the Pacers one did.
The Pacers one was one of the ones that was all right. Magic one was good. I thought the Boston one was fine too. The Chicago ones and stuff struggled as well. But okay, how do we lose this game? Like, there's obviously a few things to choose from here. One, like the Pacers, which is really good. I think 47% from 3, turnovers, late game stuff. The 58-second avalanche where he was 105, 142 to go, and then it's just Halliburton 4-point play, turnover. It's so take your pick, Truth.
Well, I think there are a few reasons, Jake, and they were all kind of highlighted in that third quarter, which has been an issue for the Celtics all season. I mean, they now have a negative point differential in the third quarter for the entire year, which, for my opinion, the best team in the NBA just doesn't make any sense. If you look at the first quarter, the Celtics outscored teams by almost 7 points per game, which is twice as good as anyone else in the league. Like, they give a chance to be the best first quarter team in NBA history. Pretty good in the second, pretty good in the fourth, but for some reason, coming out of halftime, they kind of look a little flat, and that was the case last night. So they get outscored by 14 in the third, and I think the biggest reason why is the three-point shooting, like you mentioned, but also the turnovers. So you look at the last two games, guys. The Celtics had 20 turnovers against Philly Friday, against a Philly team that was missing its two best players. So that should not have been a close game, but it was, because the Celtics were mistake-prone, and I don't know if they weren't as up for the game as they otherwise would have been if those two guys had been playing. But they turn it over 20 times, which is a season high. Come out, they turn it over 18 times at Indiana. And if you give that team live ball turnovers, you're done. I mean, they play at the fastest pace in the league. They have the most efficient offense to this point in NBA history. Same thing with the raw scoring numbers. They shoot a ton of threes. And if you turn it over against them, you are not going to have a very good chance to win unless you shoot the lights out from deep. And they just didn't do that. I mean, Hauser was great. Aside from him, I think we were 6 for 33 or something like that from distance. Just very uncharacteristic performance from the Celtics. And so, we were talking about, Greeny from Barstool earlier. He loves tweeting out the Missoula ball thing. But this is where it bites you. I mean, because the Celtics are very reliant on the three-point shot. I personally think that it's a fine strategy, and we've seen teams win championships by doing that in the past. But you end up with nights like this, where if only one guy is hot, the rest of the team is ice cold, you are not going to keep pace with that team. No pun intended.
Yeah, we've been cataloging win types so far this season, and I think, and loss types. And I think the way that we lost last night, we've seen it before this season already a couple of times. Minnesota comes to mind also, where we actually don't shoot well at all from three, and yet we still somehow are in a position to win the game, a tie game with 2 or 1, few minutes to go. And unfortunately, those Tyrese Halliburton threes looked like he just magicked them in. We were talking before we recorded, like it looked like a Patrick Ewing push shot from the post, but from beyond the three-point arc. It was ridiculous how unnatural that shooting motion looked, and yet how confidently he put them up and executed for his team. So, like you said, Jake, Tyrese Halliburton kills this team, but I suppose the one thing that's helping me as a Celtics fan not feel traumatized by the three ball leaving this team again and again, which we've seen time and time again, is that they somehow this year are still finding themselves in a position to win the game despite that.
Yeah, and Ben, the Halliburton, just to touch on the Halliburton three-point shot, I think I was listening to my buddy Scal on Sirius XM this morning. They make a good point. Like, Halliburton, if you're an NBA sicko like everyone on this call is, and I'm sure everyone watching, you know how good that dude is. Like, there's no surprise when you see Tyrese Halliburton. But I think that was their first national TV game of the season. And so for him, it was a bit of a coming out party. Yeah, and I guess, look, as an objective NBA fan, it's cool to see him kind of break out like that. Obviously, as a Celtics fan, you don't love to see it against our team, but he is pretty unique. He is a special guy. And one thing for, maybe for another episode of this podcast, if you want to debate something non-Celtics, but I asked Scal this last night, if you could draft one of Anthony Edwards, Tyrese Halliburton, De'Aaron Fox to start your team, where would you go? I think that's a real debate. So we don't have to do that now.
Hey.
Dude, we can do it. We got time.
We were 2 slots off Halliburton dropping to us in that draft. But Spoonie, you go. I mean,
all right. Look, De'Aaron Fox is a great player. I think he's older than both of those guys. I just absolutely think he's third to me. I'm a big Ant guy. I love Anthony Edwards. I think defensively he's better than Halliburton too. Yeah. But the way Halliburton, this is going to sound maybe insane, but he's almost like magic in the way it's like everyone else has to play to his pace. Like, he has such an incredible impact on just in control of the game, in that it's so frenetic. Like, I almost had trouble identifying strategy last night because it was just so up and down. And that is really Halliburton's ethos that just permeates to the rest of the team. And I think that's a very rare skill that a small number of guys in NBA history possess. So I would probably, maybe this is recency bias because he just roasted us in the fourth quarter, but I think I'd take Hallie 1 right now.
It is hard not to go for Hallie, especially after he's ripped our hearts out again. But a big part of yesterday was the Celtics attacking Halliburton on the other end.
Yeah.
But with Hallie, I do think he's someone that I think will get better at defense as he gets older. He's still so young. He's still so skinny. I know The Ringer wrote an article today, and which is the Bill Simmons special. Like, how can we overreact to with some hyperbole? It's like this is Halliburton's 54 in the Garden, comparing it to Steph Curry's 54 points in the Garden. First quarterfinal. Yeah, I know, first in season tournament quarterfinal, but. I think Halliburton can get better defensively as he gets older. I think he'll be someone that really cares about it, gets stronger. But I do think like Anthony Edwards' ceiling as a two-way guy, he does actually remind me a fair bit of Tatum. If he's able to like really get his shot diet under control, like he settles a lot instead of getting to the rim, similar to Tatum. Once he kind of gets downhill and uses athleticism more, I think he gives you a more surefire two-way kind of ceiling. But for me, it's Edwards, Hallie, Fox. I love Fox as well, but I think the ceiling of those two guys is higher. Drew's like a Fox guy. I can see it in your face here.
I mean, I do that, but I'm probably with you guys. I think he'd be third on the board. Well, it's tough, and I think like I'm watching Jalen Brunson right now, and he just scored. He's not even in that mix. I know he's kind of in a different stage of his career, but like Lillard's on the floor as well. He's older now, but there's so much good basketball being played. Like that's really the moral of the argument, I would say. And it's cool. I think that the Pacers and the Pelicans are going to Vegas because we get a chance to see those teams on a bigger stage than they otherwise would be. I mean, most of the national TV regular season games are our team, the Knicks, the Lakers, maybe the Clippers sometimes, recent champs like the Bucks and the Nuggets, but these teams are ascending, and I think that's part of the reason why the in-season tournament is so great. If it exists, again, I don't even know what we're talking about with the in-season tournament, but if that
yeah.
Cool.
We no longer recognize the IST on the show. I was having some really intrusive thoughts last night watching the game. Can Jason Tatum control a game like Tyrese Halliburton can? Because he's really controlling the fuck out of this game, and it's worrying me. And then the only thing that took me out of those dark thoughts was when Tatum went at Halliburton time and time again, and you think, okay, like come a playoff series, that's going to be extremely problematic for the Pacers. A glaring issue there defensively for them. So yeah, for me, it's still Halliburton at the top of my list, and then Edwards just because of the two-way nature, and he's got that quote unquote dog in him, and then De'Aaron Fox, because I just think his game is too predicated on scoring as a dynamic guard and playing in transition, and come playoffs where things slow down, there's more half-court offense. I think that might come back to bite him.
Yeah. I mean, look.
Let me just say this to play devil's advocate again. I agree with you guys. I would have Fox 3 on that list, but one of those guys has been the best player on a really good team for a full season, and it's Fox.
Sure.
And if Fox doesn't break his finger in that Warriors series on his shooting hand, they probably win that series too. Yeah, you can't go wrong. The guards in this league are insane. Like, yeah, you talk about Brunson and our boy D. White here, but like I know, and we talk about attacking Halliburton. I feel like they didn't get to that soon enough. And Tatum, like he did. I wanted to see. People were hoping we would get elimination game Tatum, and Tatum had a fine game. 32, 12, 6. And again, we've been talking about how like the expectations and standards for Tatum are so high, as they should be. But I thought he had a really bad first quarter. So I'm going to pull up the actual first quarter numbers here.
Man,
yeah, it was
while you're doing that, Jake, let me just say, it must be really hard to beat Jason Tatum. He had a fine game, 32, 12, and 6.
Hey, man.
Yeah, we're going to get to that.
Yeah, he's about to get handed $340 million or whatever. That's why we have this. That's why I'm held to a much lower standard on this podcast here. Thank the Lords. But like he goes one for 4 from the field in the first quarter. Jaylen Brown being good in the first quarter, I think he needs to become the third quarter as well. But Tatum and the guys not attacking Halliburton a focus of the game plan, like from the jump. They did a really good job shutting him down defensively, but I thought they needed to make it. That's where they needed to create a lead. They had a 7-point lead going into the third quarter. The problem with this Pacers team is that like all it takes is a 5-minute spurt where they just go absolutely nuclear. Halliburton hits these 30-foot shots that no one can defend. And then Derek White even gets a hand to one of them, gets a block. If the tip goes to Halliburton, he gets a floater in the lane. Things just start to not go your way, and the Pacers play in such a way that like they can capitalize on these mistakes. And next thing you know, it's just an avalanche that you can't quite handle. So I think they needed to be a little more purposeful early than they were.
Derek White had a rough one as well, and actually called himself health out after the game, which was tough to see. I mean, he's normally old, reliable, and to see him have such a rough performance to the point where he actually acknowledged it and called himself out was tough.
Dude, his dad was tweeting about him. Do you guys see
know.
that?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Of all
Dude,
the
Mr.
scrutiny that you could get, you're
Mr.
old
White-
man on Twitter.
Friend of the podcast, but he holds his
That's true.
level too. Yeah.
Holds them accountable. Now, we're going to get to concerns and, relative to expectations, I think there are some legitimate concerns with this team, especially if you scroll through NBA Twitter, which we all have a habit of doing after games. Pretty dicey there, and some grief directed at the Jays and Derek White, rightfully so. But I want to get to some positives from this one first. I think there were some positive signs to glean from this game, notably Sam Hauser, who continues to be awesome. The house trap defensively, luring people into his defensive cage, trapping them. I think his glaring whiteness invites them to attack him, and he just locks them down every time. It's amazing. And then on the other end, house party, house money from three every single time. He's sort of the most consistent Celtic, I think. You kick him the ball.
My God.
You're welcome to take these. They're not going anywhere with us. It's house money from three every day.
House Money was the only one who turned up from three yesterday, and we kind of joked that we were kind of happy with Hauser shooting 44% from three, but I'm not going to be satisfied until he officially hits his sophomore at Virginia level at 49.7% from three, and the last I think 8 games or something he's at 49%. This dude is absurd shoot. He has kept these guys in games. It's just frustrating because this is the type of performance that should mean you have no chance of staying with the Celtics. And typically the other most reliable dude, my boy, the Mistress, that's a little more R-rated for that one, Drew.
Don't use that.
Yeah. The Mistress, Derek White, I fell in love with despite having a wife, which... honestly,
hold on. I need to know the genesis of this nickname, the Mistress.
The Mistress, yeah, it's truly because I loved Derek White so much that I was making my wife jealous. She said, "You're constantly talking about Derek White here," and I'm like, "You don't understand the winning plays and the ability to make the right play." But honestly, I think that he has potentially become her mistress, and she loves Derek White more than me. But last night. And obviously, Derek White, he had the turnovers, but he still had the 18 points, 7 for 16 from the field, the 8 assists. So he still had a positive assist to turnover ratio. But we're so used to D White being the most reliable, the most consistent player on this team, especially in a matchup with the Pacers, who have some of the weakest guards. You wouldn't expect the 5 turnovers to pop up, but me, I didn't actually have to use my booking at the Marriott in Indiana last night for me and the Mistress.
With the Mistress. Well, I have to add as well that you dropped the Mistress nickname in front of Richard White, Derek White's dad.
I did.
As well. It was completely confounded with where that came from, but it was hilarious nonetheless. Spoonie, any positive takeaways from this game?
Other than bringing up the time I almost cringed into my own skin when Jake brought that up
dude.
to Richard. I was like, no!
Don't do it, Jake!
No, I just thought, one, shout out to my guy, Aaron Nesmith. I was holding on to him being a good NBA player way past probably his parents were. So it's nice to win one. I thought what was really interesting is how we crashed the glass, which is just something we don't often do. And Cornette, I think we got to shout out Cornette a little bit too, because he's really turned into a really solid third big at this point. The rebounding was on point. He had 3 or 4 blocks last night. I mean, he was kind of everywhere. So yeah, just a couple notes.
I mean, but unfortunately for Cornette now, he's going to do what? He's going to refinance the house. I don't understand what because that boy was crashing the glass. Interest rates have been going up, and Jalen are going to have to cover that one for him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he can get a Venmo from Jalen or Jason once he signs the new contract. Those guys can help him out. There was a moment there, Spoonie, for probably a 2 or 3 minute stretch where I thought it was going to be the Luke Cornette game. He had 2 dunks, 2 blocks. He looked incredible. I think ultimately the water kind of found its level where Cornette playing against the highest scoring, fastest paced team in the NBA that goes 5 out is tough. But for a moment there, he played really, really well. And I also think, this is going to sound like an excuse, but we should keep in mind that Kristaps Porzingis missed the game. And I think you could make a pretty cogent argument he's been the Celtics' second best and most important player this year. And so the fact that we lost a game at their place that was tied with under 2 minutes left, missing Porzingis, maybe it's not all bad. But, of course, that's not how we roll on NBA Twitter. It's either everything's great, we're the best team ever, or we suck, we have to fire everybody. So there's no real room for nuance. But I do think that Porzingis being out played a big role.
Yeah, it is not a spectrum. It's one extreme to the other, and we ride that roller coaster from game to game. Speaking of, Drew, what is your concern level with this team? We just spoke about it. The online discourse after any loss and even a few wins, mind you, this year has been super critical, likely somewhat due to those high expectations. They're not perfect, and yet the Celts are 15-5. Are you buying into some of these genuine concerns around the team, or are you still confident that they're essentially championship caliber?
Absolutely championship caliber. There's no doubt in my mind. I think what gives me a little pause. Yeah, sorry to be a total homer.
Don't stand up, Ben. Don't stand up. That's very exciting.
Yeah, right.
Thank you. Thanks for calling it out. Sorry, Drew. Continue.
No, it's good. It's good. I think some of the concerns are warranted. You know, Holiday to me. It's a little bit confusing watching him play sometimes. You know, he's always been one of my favorite players, dating back to when he was at UCLA. He's always been one of my favorites. I always, when I created a player in 2K, I gave them Drew Holiday's crossover package because it was the best, and I loved him. But it was cool how he spelled his name, so we have the same name, but his was cooler somehow. So I've always loved Drew Holiday. But with that being said, like, there are nights where it's just kind of disappointing. It's like, you know, I was told that this guy is the best defensive guard in the league, and I think he might be. I mean, he's a contender for Defensive Player of the Year. But when I look around the league and we talked about the guys like Halliburton and Fox and Edwards, it's like our team should be built really well in a guard-dominated league because we have the two best defensive guards in the NBA. And so while our guards don't really run the offense as much as a Halliburton or a Fox, et cetera, we should be able to stop those guys or at least contain them. And I know good offense beats good defense, but I just am a little bit disappointed by that, you know? And then on the offensive end, like some turnovers from D. White and not a bunch of scoring from Drew. And again, that's not his role, but you know, there are nights where you would just like to see a little bit more of that. The other thing, and this is obvious, this has been from before the start of the season, is just the health. Like Drew goes down with, you know, sort of like a mysterious knee thing last night. He ended up coming back in the game, so I think he's fine, or at least I hope he is. But Porzingis, of course, misses his fourth in a row. And when you're paying your top 3 or 4 as much as the Celtics are, it's hard to build depth. And so I'd like to see them add somebody. I know there have been some rumors about that. I don't have any inside intel. I wish I did, but it'd be nice to see them add another contributor because it seems like the rotation is pretty set at 8 guys. And to make it through an 82-game season, you just need more than that. And once we get to the playoffs, it shouldn't be an issue. But when injuries start to happen, you get to the dog days of the season after the in-season tournament, I think we'll need a little more depth.
It's the same every year. It's the offense. The defense, again, like the Pacers, they shot 47% from 3, and we held them to like one of their lowest scores of the season. Like they were scorching. Again, like you hold Halliburton in check for a half. That's like really all you can hope for. Derek White's blocking some of these 3-point attempts. It's the offense, and I understand you don't have Porzingis out there, but the offense was starting to falter a little bit without Porzingis. With Porzingis still out there, Drew, you're on the money because You've jumped the gun on the run sheet here, but we've got the true stats. We've got the true stats. Simpatico here.
Oh, no.
Is Drew Holiday okay? 22-23 season, the year before he gets to the Celtics. His usage is 24.4%. True shooting, 58.6%. The year before that, Milwaukee, it's 23% usage, 59% true shooting. Year before that, 21% usage, 59% true shooting. This year, we have 17.1% usage. In theory, you'd hope that the true shooting, the efficiency would go up. I thought this would be a good year for that. But no, we're down to 52.6% true shooting. And if you're playing at home, league average true shootings is around 58%. He is really struggling on offense right now. And that is probably right there the way to diagnose what's kind of going wrong with the Celtics offense, because if he's up around his normal 58% and he's not turning the ball over as much, the offense is just going to look a lot better. And some of the best games this season have been when like Derek White and Drew Holiday are combining for like 17 shots apiece, but they're at like 65% from the field. The problem is he's just like missing a lot of the shots that I feel like he usually does, which makes me think that it's going to be okay. The dark parts of my brain are like, he's 33 years old.
He's winding down.
Is this a thing? But he's been incredible on defense. Athletically, he's been fantastic. He's been captaining the defense. So I don't think it's like a decline physically. And then it reminds me of Derek White when he arrived here. He was really good on defense, making the right play. But confidence and comfort in the system was just not there. And up until, really the second half of last season and this season, he's been by far the most comfortable and confident that we've seen. So that's probably the hope, is that Drew Holiday, once he finds himself a bit more on the offense, that's when we get back to where we know Drew Holiday can at least be 58% true shooting kind of level.
Yeah, my favorite thing about watching Holiday play is when he calls for the press on his own. It doesn't even come from the sideline. You can just see him lock eyes with some of his teammates and give them a motion like, let's press here. And I actually thought they would do that a little bit more last night, because that to me is a way you can slow the Pacers down a little bit off a make or a made free throw, just to make them get into their sets at 17 or 18 on the shot clock instead of 21 or 22. I can't remember. I don't think we did that a ton last night, but like you bring up a good point, Jake, that I don't think the defense was that bad yesterday. Especially in the first half. They scored 48. That was their third lowest total in the first half all season. And until that, avalanche at the end, this is a team that's averaging almost 130 points per game coming in. And, the Celtics played pretty well defensively. I think the pace was maybe a little slower than we expected in a typical Pacers game, because it did sort of feel like a playoff game, so another win for the in-season tournament there. But defensively, the team is really good. But, I remember, so just to give you guys a peek behind the curtain, for every game I have these charts with, names and numbers, obviously, and heights, weights, hometowns, colleges, all that stuff. And then I have a team stats category with offensive rating, defensive rating, pace, points in the paint, etc. And the offensive rating for the Celtics was first or second for the first couple weeks of the season. I think we might be outside the top 10 now, or right near there. And so the offense has been a little bit of a concern. You're going to have natural peaks and valleys when you shoot as many threes as the Celtics do. But yeah, the offense has not been the same as it was in the first couple weeks of the season.
Just staying under the curtain there, can you explain to us the Dick Light experience and what that's like during the game, and like to what extent, or I guess what percentage of those stats that you're just coming up with mid-game is it Dick Light handing that to you versus you coming up with stuff yourself? And is that just coming into you via the earpiece? Like we don't hear much from Dick Light, so I think fans are curious.
100% of the stuff I say is via Dick Lipe. Imagine I'm a puppet and Dick Lipe is the puppeteer, and he's basically telling me.
It's that simple.
No, it's funny. I'm glad you asked about that, Ben, because Dick Lipe, for people at home, they got to be wondering, like, who the F is Dick Lipe, and why do they keep saying his name? And now they see it on the screen, and there was no profile picture, and now there is, which, by the way, I took, because at the Sixers game at the Garden last weekend, I said, Dick, you need a profile picture, man. So I snapped one, sent it to him. He made it his profile picture. His next tweet, I responded. I said, nice profile photo, # dick pic, which is funny because Dick has no idea why that's funny. That's part of the charm. Dick Lipe is the statistician for the Celtics home broadcast and has been, I think, for like 40 years. He used to be in the athletic department at Bentley, which is a small athletic school in the Boston area. And he still does it for the Celtics, which is great because he's one of the best in the business. And so at home games, Dick sits next to, thanks, Jesse. Dick sits next to the announcers and hands them stuff. On the road, sometimes he'll type stuff in. So we have this monitor. This is really inside baseball here, so stop me if you're bored. But there's this monitor in front of us that has all the reads. So like starting lineups brought to you by Jordan's Furniture, new Holiday Wonderland in Avon, or whatever it is. So that's on the top half of the monitor, and that rotates through as we have new reads. And then on the bottom half, sometimes Dick will chime in with a stat. So, and then I can also text Dick. So I like that thing about 48 points in the first half. I texted him. I'm like, Dick, is that their lowest scoring first half of the season? And he'll get back to me in like 30 seconds.
I will say that stat that I think Dick Lipe had, it was like when the Celtics out-rebound their by teams by more than 12 in the first half, that whatever, I was like, damn it, we're going to lose.
Why does everyone think that I'm jinxing the Celtics? The free throw thing,
we're psychos.
And the rebounding thing, and then the 30-plus point thing. Leave me alone.
Yeah, it's not Drew. It's just the broadcaster thing. And then, because I was watching on delay, actually, speaking of the like, you thought that there was a timeout. And then, like, I fast forward on my Apple TV, and like, it wasn't. And then I'm like, gosh, go back, and I'm like, Drew, well, you're killing me here, man. Come on.
Just a bit of feedback.
It's funny. When you watch enough of the same show over and over again, you get in the rhythm of it, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You have like the QB. It's like Pavlovian. You hear the cue, and then you know to fast forward. So we started playing the music, and like started going to break. You see the scoreboard, and all of a sudden it's like, just kidding. We're still here. That wasn't a time. Everyone in the building thought it was a timeout. I don't know what happened there.
Amazing. I wish that we all had our own Dick Lipe in our lives, just a stat man in our ears. It'd be a great way to experience life. And I'd never apologize about being too inside baseball. We, like Spoonie said, we're psychos, and we want to know absolutely everything. So thank you. We are going to now move on and forget about the in-season tournament forever. But first, a quick word from our sponsor, FanDuel.
Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/Boston and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
I got one for you, fellas. This one is the obvious. Patriots, Steelers, Thursday night football. Don't watch the game, obviously, but Patriots under 12.5 points for the entire game. I don't know how they're going to score 12.5 points. The Chargers have the worst defense in the league, and they scored 0. And the Steelers have a good defense. I'm trying to pick them up in fantasy, but, Patriots under 12.5, Steelers. Lock it in responsibly, obviously.
You gotta hope the defense has 14 points, and that's the only way that hits the over.
Yeah.
But Drew, I wanted to talk to you about your relationship with Mike. I mean, Mike is obviously like a Boston institution. My entire life, Mike Gorman has been calling games for the Celtics, and I'm in my mid-30s. So what have your conversations been like with Mike? Has he I just imagine him giving you fatherly advice about how to announce games. But so what have you guys talked about? Has he provided you any sage words you've taken to heart?
Yeah, Mike just texts me, don't drive drunk every night, because he really is like my father. No, Mike is, and seriously, it's going to sound like I'm saying this because, I have to or whatever, but Mike is such a cool dude. That's just plain and simple. As awesome as he is as an announcer, he is an even cooler dude in person. And his wife, Terry, has also been awesome to me. That Sixers game over the weekend, I spent most of it sitting next to Terry because she, I was sort of floating around. I have my season-long pass at TD Garden, but that night it was a big game. It was a weekend game, so I didn't ask the PR staff to get me a seat, in the media seating. I'm like, I'll float around. And then I ended up sitting next to Terry courtside under one of the baskets for a while. They both have given me great advice, and Terry has been in broadcasting and worked with the NBA for a little bit as well, so she really knows her stuff too. And they both give me good advice. I remember they sort of split their time between New York and Boston, and they were driving back from Boston, and I talked to them for probably an hour, and they had it on speakerphone in the car. That was a few weeks ago, and they were just sort of giving me advice about the best way to do the job. And what sticks out to me is, first of all, how kind and gracious both of them are. And second of all, Mike was it's really important to watch the monitor instead of just what you're seeing in front of you. You do need to look at the monitor. And by the monitor, we mean the program feed, which is what you're seeing at home. Because when you're in the mix, right, you can get sort of distracted. I might be looking at the Pacers bench when at home you're seeing something else, because I'm trying to keep tabs on everything at once. But if you're not seeing it, then it doesn't make sense to talk about. And Terry was saying there's actually psychology behind that. It's like, if you speak to what the viewer is seeing, it's like a mind meld or something, and it lets them know, hey, we're in this together. It's pretty heady shit. It's like, sort of above my pay grade, but it makes sense enough.
Yeah.
And so I've gotten a chance to spend a lot of time with them, and then that sort of opened doors for me to meet other legends of the game. Like, I got a beer at the Putnam Club at TD Garden after a game with Mike, Terry, Scal, Abby, Mike Breen, and then Steve Paliuka, one of the Celtics owners, came over for a little bit.
That's amazing.
Oh my God, that was kind of like the holy shit moment. Welcome to the NBA. But they've opened those doors for me because they're just really gracious and really kind. And Mike's actually said a couple times, like, he's sort of happy that the Celtics and NBC Sports Boston hired someone he didn't know before, because it's given us a chance to develop this organic relationship, and I feel really grateful, because honestly, like you said it, Spoonie, Gorman's been doing this as long as you've been alive. He's been doing this almost twice as long as I've been on this earth, and like, no one's heard of me or anything. Like I said, I'm not from here, so he could have easily been like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, he can be the next Mike Gorman, but he's been the complete opposite.
Yeah, he seems like such a cool, nice dude, so it's cool to have that confirmed. Sorry, Jake, I cut you off.
I was just going to say, like, the thing about you watching the monitor, because firstly, NBC Sports Boston does an incredible job. The broadcast is fantastic. But does, like, you're watching the monitor and, like, the play is about, like, they're showing a replay or they're showing a close-up of Joe Mazzulla's face as, like, the Pacers, I can, like, hear them running up the court. And I'm like, Drew,
yesterday.
I know. I was like, thank God Drew's here to be like, the Pacers are doing this thing, because I'm about to lose my mind.
Dude, but that's what happens when you play the Pacers. It's the same thing as when you're doing a college football game with a team that goes super fast. Like Tennessee last year, I did a Tennessee game, and we realized quickly there's just no time for replays. You want to get a replay, wait till they score a touchdown, wait till there's a timeout or a fake timeout, and we think we're going to break but actually come back. Like that is really tough playing the Pacers. That happened once last night, but our producer Paul Lucy and our director Jim Edmonds, two of the best in the business, and they've been doing it for a long time and have made me feel really comfortable.
Great question. Are you allowed to say this? This takes it, makes it. What do you got?
I really want to. I don't think I can get away with that.
Not yet.
I've said "got it" a few times, but that's just because that's kind of a normal phrase you hear broadcasters say all the time. Not Mike's trademark cadence. Takes it, makes it. That's really only a Gormanism. I think I'd have to pay him a royalty every time I say that, and I don't have enough money for that, so not yet.
Yeah, fair enough. So, obviously coming into this job, you've had a breadth of broadcasting experience, and I suppose some expectations of what this role, calling games for the Celtics, might be like. That said, what's something that you've learned in your short time in the role that maybe you didn't expect would be the case going in?
Oh man, I think I forgot how fun it is to be in the NBA mix. Because, like you said, I've been at ESPN now for a couple of years, and I do mostly college sports there. I've had a chance to do a few pro games, but mostly on like alternate broadcasts. Like I did a Toy Story NFL game. I did an NHL game that was also animated. So it's been mostly college sports when it comes to live action. And so getting back into the NBA rhythm, and I say getting back, I mean, I've always been a huge NBA fan, but when you're working in other sports, it sort of becomes tough to keep up with it at all times. And just being back in that mix has been so cool. Every single game we do, there's this real burst of adrenaline, I feel, between the time when we tape the open. So again, we'll take you inside baseball here. We come on the pregame show, Scal and I do, usually about 30 minutes before tip. And the pregame show is either 30 minutes or an hour, depending on the game. So it's either 25 or 30 minutes before tip, usually we come on the pregame show. And we stay in our spot, and then we tape the open. So that minute, 2-minute segment you see right off the top, like at the top of the hour or at 7:30 whenever we come on the air. And so between the time that we tape the open and the game tips off, there's usually about 10 to 15 minutes. And every single night, I just feel like I'm on cloud 9 in that span for some reason. When we're walking back from the floor to our broadcast position, whether that's courtside or up in the top of the concourse for the teams that love to make money because they're super greedy and they put the announcers at the top of the concourse instead of courtside where we should be. But even that, it's like damn, like you just soak it in. And all these road games are so cool because half the fans are wearing green, right? So it's like I can look. It's like you're walking down a runway and you look around. You're like, yeah, man, let's go Celtics. Like, let's get one. And there's some people like ask to take photos, which is really neat and flattering.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, man. Just being in the NBA. I know it's a pretty generic answer, but that's probably been the coolest part of the job for me so far. Especially being with this team. Like, we've already taken a shot at Charlotte, so let's just take another one. If you're calling games for the Hornets, like, it's not the same when you're on the road. You don't have Charlotte fans traveling everywhere. With the Celtics, like, they're all over the place, and it's been really cool to meet those people all over the country.
Look, I'm sure everyone watching, including the three of us right here, like, yep, Mike Gorman's awesome. Yep, Celtics fans are everywhere. Yeah. Like, you're speaking that language. What's kind of your prep kind of process, because like if right now, like, it's going to either be Knicks or Bucks right on Friday night your time. Like, I'm sure you're watching those games. Obviously, you listen to the First of the Floor podcast, get up to date on all the latest stats and whatnot. But like, what's your kind of homework process like?
Yeah, so I have a Twitter list, actually. You mentioned your podcast. I have a list on Twitter with a bunch of Celtics accounts that kind of help you stay abreast of the team and what the fans are talking about. That's part of it. But most of it is, so like I mentioned earlier, I have these charts where really I can't look at those during the game as much as I'd probably like to, because if you look down, you can miss something. And that's another thing you learn quickly doing the NBA is shit just happens so fast. You don't have time to get distracted. I actually talked with Ian Eagle, is a big mentor of mine. He's the voice of the Nets, and he does NBA on TNT, NFL on CBS. Legend. And one of the nicest dudes you'll ever meet. I talked to him for a while, and that was one thing he said. He's like, you have to be ready at all times for the most amazing feat of athleticism you've ever seen to happen like that. Yeah. Because it really can't come out of nowhere. So with that being said, I can't really look at my notes that much, so it's about memorizing it. It's not about what's down here. It's about what's up here. But I find that writing that stuff on my chart helps me memorize it. And everybody does it a little bit of a different way. Like, a lot of people say if they handwrite it, then they memorize it. For me, I like to type it out because, my handwriting sucks and I don't have that much room on the board anyway. So I write stuff in during the course of a day. A typical game day on the road, we'll have a production meeting at 10. So I'll talk with Scal and our producer, Paul. And then we'll go to shoot around. I usually go with Abby, where she does a couple interviews. I sort of hang around and talk to other people and watch what they're doing at practice. That's all in the morning. Rest of the day, try to get a workout in because Scal works out like twice a day. So I feel like I have to try to keep pace with him, print those charts I said. And a lot of that stuff, guys, is like just making sure that I have a pretty good idea of what's happening across the league, because you never know. Like, working with Scal, he hosts a 3-hour radio show every day talking about the NBA as a whole. And that's really a luxury for me as his partner, is we can sort of go anywhere and he'll be ready. Like, he's got it. And I have to, that goes both ways. I have to be ready for him to bring something up so I can sort of respond with my own take. But yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. It's not as simple as just showing up and talking. I think a lot of people think that that's what the job is, and obviously that's what it looks like. But you do have to sound like you know what you're talking about, and there's a lot of work that goes into that.
Yeah. Of course. Have you had a? Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ben. No. You go.
Oh, just on the Scal thing, have you had a chance to hoop with Scal yet? And if so, could he tell us anything? Like, what are his tendencies in his older age?
It's starting to bother me because he said like 10 times, oh yeah, we'll play pickup, like we'll get you in the game. He plays with his son, Ryder, who's like 10 or 11 years old. They play a local high school team. They get some runs in. And I'm like, bro, I want to play. Like, I haven't had a good run in a long time. He's like, yeah, man, we'll get you in.
He's scared.
Still hasn't happened.
Yeah. Because you're not afraid to go at Scal a little bit on the broadcast, because he's worried. He's like, I can't have Drew coming on being like, yeah, we got you like 3-0 yesterday.
I gave you 15. Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah.
If there's one thing Scal's not worried about, it's that. If you've seen the Scallenge, you know that he has no fear when it comes to average Joes like myself. And I'm not a very good basketball player, but I told him, if I'm on your team, you will get the dirtiest player you've ever seen in a pickup game on your side. I will throw elbows. I'll set moving picks. I'll do whatever you need, man. So hopefully we get to play soon.
Yeah. Did you know Scal before you started in this job? Because I think you guys have a very natural chemistry, and you've only done it like 10 or 15 games or so. Or is this just like you got plopped in the chair and they said you go and develop chemistry on your way?
The first time we met was the audition we did together, and that was in mid-May. It was a second-round series against the Sixers. Game 6, because it was a road game, the studio programming on NBC Sports Boston was in the actual studio in Needham, Massachusetts. So we got to do that demo together, and I remember this vividly because I've always been a big fan of Scal. Like, of course, a white dude, like,
hell yeah,
gives us
There's
hope, right?
Yeah.
And I thought that his post-game presser when they won the finals in 08 is still one of the best moments in NBA history to me.
Yeah.
So I've always been a huge fan of him. And when he walked in to do the demo, I wouldn't say I was starstruck, but I was like, damn, this is pretty cool. Like, I'm sitting talking about basketball, watching a game with Scal. Like, that's pretty awesome. And from the jump, guys, he was extremely supportive and made me feel like I was already part of the team. There was actually one point during that, fake broadcast we were doing where I made a call. I think it was like a transition layup, and Scal just goes, "That was a great call, man." I thought we were trying to keep, like, he broke the role, you know what I mean? Like, he broke the fourth wall, but it was just cool because it made me feel really good and like I was ready for this. And then he's just been like, I consider him a really good friend now, even though, like you said, Spoonie, it hasn't been that long. First time we hung out after I had gotten the job was at Media Day, when they sort of clandestinely whisked me in there. They hadn't announced that I was joining the team yet. And so I roll in, and Scal's like, he was already there. So he's like, "Man, you're late on your first day? Like, we got to trade you for Noah Eagle," who's aforementioned Ian's son, working for the Nets now, total studies, my college roommate. So we're tight.
Oh, sick.
And so Scal's like, "You got to trade you." I'm like, "You're going to have to throw in some cash considerations and picks to trade me for Noah." But it's cool that that's a relationship we've had, and it feels natural. And Scal, who's not from Boston, has really adopted the mentality of someone who is, I think, where he says, like, if I'm too nice to you, you know that I don't like you. You know I like you if I'm, like, giving you shit and we can go back and forth. And I feel like that's what we have.
Yeah, the banter is solid. It sounds natural right off the cuff there. So, it's sounding really good on the broadcast. Maybe we can end on this. So, I think one of the key differences, Drew, with you in the announcer's chair has been your connection to NBA online culture. We've kind of touched on it already, and you've dropped a few references. Most recently, I think there was the Pepe Silva meme from Always Sunny, which it did go out over Scal's head, unfortunately, but it was a good reference at the time. And look, every time you do that, it feels like there we go. We do have it. Thanks, guys. Every time you do that, it feels like Celtics Twitters is perk up. So is that approach intentional? Is that just you being you, or is this more of an upcoming trend that you think younger announcers in general who grew up as citizens of the internet are starting to seamlessly integrate into the call?
Well, Ben, I love that you bring that up because to me, the most important, or one of the most important jobs of an announcer is to make it feel personal to everybody. So one of the most important pieces of advice I've ever gotten is 3 words. It's consider the listener. And Marty Glickman, who's like an OG broadcaster, he called games for the Knicks and the New York Baseball Giants way back in the day. And if you've never heard of Marty Glickman, for the younger folks out there, I highly recommend reading about him. There was an HBO documentary about him. He was actually an elite runner who I think qualified for the 1936 Olympics, but those were the ones in Germany. And as a Jewish man, he either couldn't compete or couldn't travel. I couldn't remember exactly the story, but Marty Glickman is basically one of the most interesting guys in the last 100 years. And so when he transitioned from being an athlete to being a broadcaster, he kind of paved the way for a lot of people to come after him. And his thing was consider the listener. And the key thing there is it's listener singular, not listeners plural, right? And so I think the more it can feel like a one-on-one conversation, even if you're watching with like a group of 20 people, the more it can feel like a one-on-one conversation, the more the announcer is, or the more the fan, is going to feel like it matters. It's going to feel like the announcer is talking directly to you, and that's a good feeling. It's the same reason we want to talk to what you're seeing on the monitor, because we want to let you know, hey, we're with you. And so I think, referencing the stuff on Twitter, it's kind of dangerous, because I'm basically telling everyone, hey, I see your tweets. And so if they fire off a few mean ones, then that's dangerous. But I also think it is important. Like, that's a big way people consume the NBA now. I think a big reason why NBA Twitter has become such a big deal is the league actually allows their clips to circulate, even if it doesn't originate from their accounts. Like, look at Worldwide WAP, who's one of the saints of NBA Twitter. If he were doing that with MLB, he would have been banned 100 times, But the NBA allows that to happen, and it's such an active community. But I enjoy. I'm not really part of it, but I do spectate, and so I like seeing that stuff. And when you reference it, it's like, hey, I'm watching and listening to the same thing you are.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, hell yeah. We loved it. Sorry, last question. How do you balance being a homer and being kind of not too biased? Because Scal, I actually think I watch all the other broadcasts. You got the Warriors broadcast, and that's makes me want to just tear my ears off my skull. And then when the Rudy Gobert thing happened with Draymond, and they're anyway, that's all aside. Scal's actually very objective, somewhat to the point. I'm like, Scal, this is our broadcast. Tell me it was a foul. And yes, how do you balance that?
It's a really good question, Jake, because I think I haven't found that balance quite yet. Especially because, speaking of balancing things, one of the biggest challenges for me so far has been trying to do right by Mike and not having it be jarring for Celtics fans when they flip on the game and Mike's not there. So balancing that while also being myself, and referencing NBA Twitter is one way to do that. Because what I've said, and this is true, is there's only one Mike Gorman. So we joked about saying, takes it, makes it, got it, all that stuff. In all seriousness, I can't be Mike. There's only one Mike. I need to be myself. And so with that being said, I don't want it to be weird for people. I'm not going to come in and treat this like a national broadcast, because it's not. It's our show. It's the local show. But I do think at a certain point, if you're like the aforementioned broadcast you mentioned of another team, you lose credibility if you're not telling the truth. If we went out there and said, yay, Celtics great, they didn't do anything bad, if they lose, it's everybody else's fault, the refs screwed us, at a certain point, people will stop believing you. And I think one thing that Scal does really well is he maintains his credibility, not just for our show, but for the national radio show he does, by telling it like it is. There are plenty of times where he'll say, I'm not sure if that was a foul when we're going to the line. But he does it the other way, too. And so, I don't know. It's interesting, and obviously I think about this a lot, especially as someone who, I'm not from Boston, self-admitted. I grew up in Minnesota, and the Timberwolves were my first favorite team. I actually got, speaking of Twitter, someone tweeted at me when we lost that game in Minnesota, dude, we get it. You grew up in Minnesota. You don't have to say all those nice things about Anthony Edwards. Whoa, are we watching the same game? The dude killed us. I actually think that hyping him and Halliburton up is only fair, and actually makes me feel better as someone who wants to see the Celtics win. We didn't just lose to a bunch of bums. We lost to some of the best players in the world. And so I think that obviously we want the team to win, because it makes the job more fun for us. And naturally, traveling with the team, you get to know these guys, you get to know the players and the coaches, and you want them to do well. But we also can't be having the pom-poms out cheering for the Celtics on the show, because at that point you lose credibility. So it's a really good question, and it's one that I'm still trying to find the right answer to, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, look, I think this is the first time that most Celtics fans, sort of 40 and under, have had to sort of experience what the transition is from one announcer to another. So, Drew, we really appreciate you taking the time to, come on and answer a lot of these questions that I think are naturally occurring in the minds of lots of Celtics fans. So, let's wrap it up there. Drew, enjoy the rest of the season. I desperately hope, for my personal sake, that it ends in a championship. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks. Screw the NBA Cup. We're going for the real thing.
Yeah,
baby.
that's right.
18.
I can't wait to hear House Trap and House Money on the broadcast. It's gonna be that's gonna be the moment. Yeah, the mistress. maybe the West Coast swing when everybody's asleep.
All right, Drew, thanks again. That's going to do it for this one.
Drew.
We'll be back here live on YouTube early next week. Spoonie, Jake, love your work, guys. Until next time, go Celtics.
I love